Hello, welcome to the Hello, welcome to the Wargamer. I'm your host Rob. Welcome to Stream Street Day 105, 105 days in a row. This is the 11th show with these two incredible gentlemen, Val and the Falcon. There they are. Val, how are you?
Oh man, we're rapidly coming up on as many stat centers as there have ever been. I think we're at like 31 or 32. So okay.
And the Falcon, how are you?
I'm tired as always, but great. Loving it. Living my life.
Well, welcome to the 40k adjacent show, a show where you may hear 40k news, even during some of the biggest news 40k has had in recent memory. It might contain some 40k news, but it's smidge. But
And
I
it's
can
still
go on.
higher quality content than the 40k show, so it's fine.
Oh, what? Our 40k show? How dare you, sir?
Oh.
How dare you?
I mean, I've listened to it. He's not wrong.
Wow! How dare you? Nick and Tom are fantastic. But
One of
we haven't
those
even
people
talked
is pretty
about what I
good.
think of them as individuals. I mean, that's it work.
The real reason that we're here today, though, on the 40k adjacent show, is to announce our spin-off show, or a 40k Stat Center spin-off show, or I'm not really sure at this stage. But I've heard that there's a show that you can't.
40k adjacent show.
Yeah, it's either above or adjacent to, but it's a show that you can't watch back on demand. You can only catch live. Is that the myth?
Yep. That's the myth. It's purely by choice. It has nothing to do with a lack of technological ability on my part. Nothing like that. Not at all. Not even a little bit.
In my day, back in my studies, we called that the effervescence of theater.
I've been watching a lot of David Tennant. He's been doing talks for the Royal British Academy of Acting, and I think that's where I've learned it from. Just listening to him and how he's talked. I've changed my views on how to properly stream a Twitch feed.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And can you describe what the show is?
Oh yeah, sure. I guess. So it's Fireside with the Falcon. It's a probably weekly foray into just reading to folks at night. So last night around 9:30 PST, it was about like 6 hours ago, I started reading some Dan Abnett short stories to whoever happened to be online at the time. And that's about it. I wear my captain's hat, my house coat. I have a smoking jacket on the way. Have my little pint of water. And hammer that out. Do a couple little voices. Nothing extravagant because my voice gets a little raw. Did Pestilence, I believe. I haven't said that yet. That was the read last night from the Magos Dan Abnett book. It's a good time. Living the dream.
Can we add the seaside sounds that we had once on Stat Center when we covered the East Coast tournament?
I mean, yeah, we can 100% do that.
Hold on. I can't do it. Damn.
You don't even know what the ocean sounds like.
Never seen it. Not even once.
Is it full of owls? Is it full of owls?
That's what it sounds like you think. Full of owls and tin whistles. That's about it. That's all.
If we wanted to find out about the Fireside with the Falcon, as you said, it's already irregularly, maybe once a week at different times, and we can't watch it back. And it won't be a podcast. So how will we find out when it's going to happen?
Well, twitch.tv/thefalcon40k is what I'm hosting it on. I do have a Twitter account now where I do the tweeting.
Oh shit!
So I've not done it yet, but it's been created. So
are you gonna join my shit talk on the Twitter because it's the best?
I mean, I shit talk a lot everywhere else, so it's probably where I'm just gonna continue doing that until I get banned.
I've been thinking a long time about realigning Val to be more of a Twitter, maybe Snapchat type character, and then reclaiming Facebook for actual me, and then Val can just sort of drift around in the ether out there. I think that's a good idea, Pete.
Twitter is the home of the hot takes and the interaction. It's one of my favorite places to chat. So please, both of you, join in there. Also, this is a great opportunity for me to talk about something that is 40k adjacent, yet not 40k. In the Frontline Gaming Twitter account is absolutely nowhere near on message. I have no idea who runs that, yeah, or what their plan is, because I'm like, okay, new 40k rules are out today. Maybe they're going to share something about that, and they're like, look at this meme about this movie from 20 years ago, and I'm like, how is this relevant? Like this is
well, that's Reese then. That's Reese. That has to be
to that one.
Initially I was going to say it's probably Mariana because she does all the tech stuff, but based off that, it's 100% Reese.
I was going to say it's just a lot of cat and dog gifs that could be Reese. Although I feel like he's the type of guy who would say twatter or something like that instead of twit.
Yeah, I mean, just like he's like me, we're the same age.
Twitted.
Like,
does he think computers are scary? Is he like not into this?
No,
a little
bit.
Little
about
bit.
computers in the late '90s, and I think he feels confident with it. You got one iPhone. Job said it with an iPhone.
He types like this. I saw him at SoCal. He even makes that noise.
While you two just riff on in whatever way you want the stuff that's come up, I'm going to read you some of the things that have recently come out from. Oh no, they have shared some news. That's fun, but that never gets any interaction. Then most recently, there's a picture of Keanu Reeves as the Emperor, and he's just put those who are going through a tough time. Don't forget, Keanu protects. And I'm like, how is this relevant?
That sounds like a Mariana thing. Now I'm not sure.
It could go either way. Frankly, the Reese has the Twitter account hypothesis did feel surprising to me. So yeah, I think it could be a Mariana thing, and it could just be that she knows that none of them know that they have a Twitter account.
That's a definitive possibility.
From 2 days ago, the meme of the guy sat down arguing, "Change my mind." We currently have Spaceballs is a better movie than the entire Disney Star Wars trilogy. Yes. Change my mind. Yeah,
okay, that's a Reese one. That's 100% Reese.
Why is this where he's putting this information? This is
why isn't it? Why isn't it? Is the question.
But Warhammer,
there should
Twitter,
be more.
How big is Warhammer Twitter? Like I guess you could quantify the amount of chatter about 40K, etc. on Twitter pretty easily. I've never even looked to see how big the community is. Every now and then I'll see a Facebook crank talking about something they said on Twitter, but I've never actually engaged with it.
Pretty big. Like for painting, obviously. I mean, Instagram's obviously huge for painting, but there's a lot of Twitter accounts as well. Like I follow a whole bunch of people. It's a really engaging space where people can kind of it's my preferred medium. I find because Facebook's got some very weird algorithms. Super weird algorithms, where Twitter is more direct communication between people. I mean, there's still loads of shitty takes, and I'm responsible for at least 10% of those shitty takes. But there's
given your beachside sound effects, it's 100% true that you're at least 10%.
All right.
Go on.
Well, that is a very large 40K question from Kelbar05. I'm just going to let someone else read it. Maybe the chat can help out. I mean, I'm just scanning. I see words like eradicators, fire dragons. Don't even know what those are. So
he's just saying that lore-wise, Eldar are supposed to have better weapons than everybody else, but they don't. So should he keep his Eldar to narrative? Yeah. Eldar are kind of in a weird spot right now. They have an older codex, so that doesn't help any longer. Their Psychic Awakening was a good in a box. We'll have to see what 9th does for them, but Eldar are a little too mobile now for a game on a smaller table, so I think that'll be an issue for them. And weapons-wise, Marines have been getting some pretty crazy stuff. Because, I mean, you're talking about fire dragons and how they seem lackluster compared to eradicators that were just leaked. I mean, Custodes have their version of that, and it only has a 12-inch range on its gun. And there are, like, the Emperor made everything for them. So, the lore only goes so far to sell models, I guess, even though I think it does a good part of that. So.
Yeah, Val, have you seen the new Eradicator rules? I think this is what's currently being discussed.
I saw in one of my chats yesterday. I spent, rather than actually doing work, I tried to rewire some dimmer switches, and it took a good 12 hours, and they're still not wired. So I'm in trouble at home, and I didn't read any of this scuttlebutt at all yesterday, and I woke up this morning and checked my social medias to find 1 million messages, which I skimmed. So I did see that their rules were leaked. I understand there's something weird about unit coherency now, and
yeah, that's the big rule. That's the big change.
He didn't tell me he was going to be reading stories on the internet, and I'm mad at him about it.
I mean, the unit, the story about
I explicitly told him, but anyway.
The story about unit coherency actually brings up a Twitter point, actually, because when we get into it in a minute and what it does mean and what it says it means and what it's meant to mean are all different things. But because FLG were replying to comments, like people were sharing pictures, this is what it actually says, and then FLG was saying, no, this doesn't mean what you think it means, and then people were saying, well, actually, gonna need you to make me understand words better. So there's some fun engagement there. Pete, what's it meant to mean? Go on, Val. Sorry, what is it? Whoa.
So hold on, so from what I understand, you got to be. So an individual model has to be within 2 inches of two models.
If you have more than 6,
if there's more than 6 in the unit, so that everyone's been making this like dog bone diagram. So like you have like strung out middle and then a triangle at the end. But the thing that kind of I didn't catch because I didn't read it in detail was what's the casualty removal thing?
Okay,
and what happens?
So that's the change. So when it was initially leaked, or not leaked, when GW came out with it, they mentioned unit coherency was a thing, and they said that if you have 6 or more models in a unit, each model has to be within 2 inches of 2 other models. And they didn't mention anything else. So a lot of people, the first reaction was, oh my God, this is crazy. Conga lines are dead. And then other people right away were like, no, you just put little triangles at the end and you're fine. So they have these like dog bone diagrams. But then on the stream, I believe it was, they kind of released the rest of the rule, which was that at the end of every turn, the very last thing you do is a unit coherency check. If you don't have units, if you have a unit that's out of coherency, you have to pull models until they are in coherency. So if you use that kind of dog bone diagram to do it, if you lose any models in that, you're going to end up getting brought down to 5 models no matter what. Because as soon as you lose one, one of your ends is going to end up being out of coherency, or somewhere in the middle is going to be out of coherency, and you're going to have to pull until you get down to 5 models. So that way because at 5 models, it's 2 inches to one other model in the unit rather than 2. So that's a big deal. It's a big change. So now if you're going to screen using larger units, you're probably going to have to do it 2 rows deep across the board. And even then, you're going to have to be very careful. I mean, AOS has been doing this for forever, right?
No.
AOS
Not
has 1-inch coherency too, doesn't it?
Yeah, so AOS has 1-inch coherency, but it doesn't have this. In fact, actually, I spent all of last night, after the AOS show, pondering what this would mean for Age of Sigmar, and also how structurally it would look. Because obviously, if you're thinking, your unit of 30 boys will always be run in a kind of 3x10 or something similar, right? They're effectively making us rank models without ever saying you have to rank models. There's there's it's such an impact that I don't think people are fully getting. So when I jump my 30 boys, maybe they'll be in two rows of 15 in that situation. So that's my max. I can't string it out as a big line. And actually that isn't what happens in Age of Sigmar at all. In Age of Sigmar, there's a little bit of a difference in that you can. So there are abilities in Age of Sigmar, and there are some in 40k as well. I think snipers have got a rule where they can pick a model and not a unit. I think
the Harlequin guy that can.
There's just the Harlequin guy in 40k. The other snipers can only pick out characters, but Death Jesters, they can only do it for morale checks. So if a Death Jester shoots a unit and it causes a morale check, you pick what models they pull. So that can cause some craziness with this new rule. That's, I think, the only unit that I know of.
Yeah, so that might mean that you could potentially force one of those coherency checks in 40k.
Yeah.
In Age of Sigmar, there's a couple of special abilities that we have now to pick out an individual model, and that's mainly because they've started to give an individual model in a unit, like a captain or a guy called a Hecatos. They give them special rules, and so if you can snap out the synergy out of the unit, you basically take away their special ability. That the captain or the general in that sergeant in that unit does the special thing, if that makes sense. So maybe we'll see more of that put into the design space of 40k, which is really cool. But honestly, it's a huge impact, and a lot of people are just saying, "Oh, it gets rid of conga lines," but it does so much more than that. Screening is so much harder to do, and that's when you're just talking small models. When you're talking large models, like my Sindonian Dragoons, I'll only ever run a unit of 5 because
across the board. Unless you have a way to deep strike, which, I mean, they've given it to everybody. Everybody has an outflank ability. I don't see very many units running more than 5 if they can help it.
Yes.
So quick hot take here, which is everything I've seen is that basically a unit of 10. So you'd have basically 6 across the middle and then 2 guys on the ends. And then so just to spell this out, what you're saying is if I take 1 casualty, I've got to pull from either side, which then means that there won't be a guy within 2 of one of those guys. I got to keep pulling until I get all the way down the dog bone.
Exactly.
Like unraveling a sweater. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a unit of 10. Yeah. But in the example of a unit of orc boys, or I can think of cultists, or anything that can get like conscripts, anything that can get actually really big, you're still going to be able to chain those guys massively. They're just not going to be able to do what they do now, which is be fucking 4 feet long. You know what I mean?
Well, you're gonna so you're gonna have to go at least 2 rows deep, and even then going 2 rows deep, it's not going to be the same, right? Because of diagonals and how they work. You're going to end up in situations where if you pull the wrong guy, you lose 25 dudes. So it definitely changes everything. This was the Risa said it. This is the big reveal that he's been talking about that completely changes the game. Yeah. Huh. Between this and they also confirmed, they kind of pseudo announced it a few weeks ago that the game is 5 rounds now, not
5
6.
rounds. That's the massive piece of news, right? That got overlooked.
As an asterisked standard, as in that's their way of getting away from saying you don't have to. If you want to play 7 rounds or 8 rounds, just do you. But 5 is going to be the quote unquote standard.
That's a great way to make the game play a bit faster. Just knock a round off. Yeah. Although I guess out of the rule book it could potentially go 7 currently.
No, I think it'll be. I think it's going to be flat 5.
But that's what they're saying.
Yeah,
saying in the chapter approved missions or whatever, there's random turn ending, and it can go to 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually just a flat. Interesting.
Yeah, I actually think that is really telling. It makes people engage a lot quicker, but then obviously it gives you real big onus to be someone who engages quicker. So it pushes and always advertises and drives the alpha strike or heavy early engagement. Now that sounds like a good game because you're like, that's fun, but I always like the positioning and jockeying stage that a couple of extra turns potentially could give you in some situations. But that trade-off. We'll see. I think we should unpack those a little bit as well, because Ixtab is saying something in the chat, which I feel I agree with a little bit, in the he's not sure that this cure is worse than the problem. And I guess really, before we do anything else, we should identify what we think the problem is. Obviously, rampant capitalism. But with the exception of that...
I'm just
Whoa, buddy.
I'll get my Trotsky book out and start talking about this.
I got a copy of the Communist Manifesto on my shelf, just like everyone else on this podcast.
Just like literally all of us.
Anyway, what was the problem as you saw it? And did you think it was actually a problem?
About the 5 rounds or about the
Sorry,
coherency rules?
the coherency and conga lines. I think that's what we're talking about. Conga lines.
I think
it's go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
Pete.
you go, Val. No, you do you. You say it. I've had more time to think about it.
Okay. All right. So I would say that in general, it seems that they have identified one of the things slowing 40K down as very high model count, movement intensive armies. And so they have to find a way to devalue a body on the table. So this is actually an interesting way to really solve one of the problems that 8th edition had from the get-go, which is the value of one wound. So in points, the value of one wound was wildly low. But we've actually talked about point scale, right? They got to the point where they couldn't cut a point off of a cultist or a guardsman or a conscript without dropping or increasing their points cost by a very large percentage. If you go from 4 to 5 points, you're increasing 25%, right? So that was an issue. So they couldn't solve the horde problem, which does. I mean, as much as orc players will say, I play fast, I finish all my games, they're sweating their balls off. They are hustling. They are cutting corners everywhere they can. They don't do Overwatch. They are racing to finish, no matter what, if you're playing in a timed game. So they have now attacked large units with this coherency thing, with the barrage rules, probably with a little bit of a points adjustment. And but specifically this thing about footprint and how coherency works very specifically makes having one wound on the table less valuable because it can take up less space. So that's what I think they're trying to do here. And was that an actual problem? I think so. Yes, I think like if you look at a lot of builds, as things got distilled, like a lot of times it would be how many wounds can I get most efficiently with the best damage output and defense. And I think you saw like the perfection of that with sort of like those Iron Hands builds that were happening at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. I think this is it. Like this is their way of fixing a problem that they didn't know they had when 8th edition started. Like you mentioned, like early builds were like, how many conscripts or razor wing flocks or whatever can I fit in my list? Because the bodies were way more important than what they were capable of. And you could tell by the way the rules were designed that GW hadn't really thought it like that way. So that's why you were able to give giant squads 4+ invulnerable saves, make them immune to morale. And so they made all these modifications slowly over time, and then they lowered points of big units to try and compensate for the fact that people were still taking 100 guardsmen, 200 orc boys, et cetera, and it did get to that point. Pete Pratt brings up a really good point in the chat. The other big issue that I've been thinking about and why this is good is smaller table it really makes a huge impact on screening. It is in certain cases, not all, because I mean, when you look at Raven Guard and stuff like that, smaller tables, you just can't screen against them anymore. But there were a lot of armies that you could just easily beat if they hadn't made changes like this with like 90 orc boys, because now you've taken up like an entire deployment zone and a half with bodies, and that really messes up like a ton of lists. They won't have the way to chew through all that in 5 rounds. So I like it. I like the change a lot. It's going to be the thing that causes feel bads, at least early on, probably forever of the edition, because of just how people are. Like that's going to be the thing. It's going to be something where you're going to be in a tournament and you're not going to remember. You're going to move a unit, like a model out of coherency, and your opponent's going to be that guy, and he's just going to be like, hey, look at that over there. Pull half the squad. It's just be a thing that's going to happen.
Well, now I don't want to push an agenda here, but 40k, back in my Warhammer Fantasy Battle days, there were these things called movement trays. Yeah, and it's not unbelievable that maybe you would just have those. Very simply, if you got your 10 intercessors, and you just think, I'm just gonna put those down. It's also really interesting where they've decided to draw the line. They haven't done it they haven't gone 10+. They haven't started it at 11. They've started it at 6, which I think is
too small. I agree. If that's where you're going, I thought 10 would be where they would kind of make the limit, because 6 is
the same thing
really small
with the blast rule too, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, I think 6 is too small for the blast rule as well. I mean, if you look at things like Thunderfire cannons putting up max shots against a 6-man squad, that seems a little silly, but is what it is. We'll see how it plays. The testers seem into it. And Xtab makes the other point that I was going to make, which is I'm quite sure GW didn't like what Conga Lines looked like on the table. It's if you are new to the game, it is like the thing that doesn't make sense when you see it, right? Like if you're a casual player and your opponent deploys in a line like it's like 1917 in some kind of trench situation, and then they all march up together,
and that's why
but 6 feet apart. Like,
but that's the aesthetic. That's how.
That's why the Brits like it. It's like, oh, well, that's a good strategy right there. It's a song.
It's actually.
it's a song.
I actually
Utopian.
was. I was actually reading an article about this last night and why actually army lines would stretch themselves out very long in that level of for long stretch communication, and specifically it was because of artillery. Like bombardments would be better when you concentrate all your troops in a place. So one of the things that happened with the rise of artillery is they stretched lines out more, which obviously were negative versus cavalry. But there was no cavalry during like First World War, Second World War sort of situations. Fascinating article, loved it. I'll find the link and I'll share it out on Twitter. I actually think aesthetically, your 10 dudes in 2 ranks of 5. The British man in me feels great. Paint them red and white. Yeah, make them walk forward in a line.
Yep.
There's a comment.
It doesn't look good when it's giant squares, right? Like that's how everybody was doing it. Giant squares and triangles. People don't like that. Gross.
No one likes that. That's
Yeah.
horrible.
There's a comment in the chat here, which is that this will impact GW's bottom line because they will sell less models. And this I don't even know if this was ever really a concept that Games Workshop has had, but it is super bad logic. And I don't mean to insult you, but I just see it all the time that GW wants to like make units and everything so cheap and make you have an army that's so massive so they sell more models. That may have been true in previous editions. In the 8th edition, it was certainly just unintended consequences, I think, in their rules design. I don't think that there was ever any like distinct desire to make it so that like conscript blobs of 30 or armies of 200 and something grots could possibly be effective. Because honestly, the thing that will sell models and sell so many models is having a really good game. Because you might be able to get one guy to buy 3 massive armies, but if you have a really good game, you could have 10 people buy 1 army, And so like that's the thing. You're going to scale up the amount of players if you have a good game rather than what their model going back for a very long time up until probably 8th edition was get as many dollars out of your diehard fans as you possibly can, squeeze them until they squeak. And that's exactly what they did. But I think really this is brilliant. If it does play better, and it, for all intents and purposes, looks like it probably will, you're going to get more people who realize the barrier to entry is lower. So now you can come in at kill team, you can come in at patrol, which is their goal for the start collecting type box sets. You can come in or you can just go full hog to the tournament level. But at each stage, it is much more accessible, and that is the way you get more people playing. Is you make it even just think about painting a kill team. If you've never played a miniatures game, like it's still an overwhelming thing for most people.
Well, I actually think the thing that that we're missing there in that conversation is the production meta as well. So like, if the game is always horde based, like let's say I always for every army need 2 blobs of 30 dudes. Well, that's a lot of building and painting time to get those in effect. But actually, if the game changes where I actually need 3 squads of 5, like elite units, that's a lot quicker for me to build, put together, paint, and it also means that like once that job is done, I can buy my next squad of 3 5-man units wherever they may look like and operate. So actually, and my horde of 10 dudes or 20 dudes costs probably the same as my box of 5 dudes. So what you just want to look at it as boxes really, and they just want to make you buy a ton of boxes. So it makes sense if we're having to put less time in building and painting a squad and then put them out on the tabletop as a thingy. And also like truthfully, having built a ton of models in the past and put loads on, and maybe this is just me, there's some horde units which I proper love, but I wouldn't mind just produce like for every 30-man unit just having to produce a 10-man unit. I don't think that's awful. I think that's kind of funky. Problem is though is then you obviously get into that concentrated power degree where your 10-man squad, if it has to be fairly elite, somehow like you've got less variance, right? Your 10-man squad has to be so powerful, but then your 5-man squad has to be a bit more powerful, your 3-man squad more powerful than them, and then you one like you're drawing the line quite finely there, and you're not allowing yourself tons of design space when it comes to wounds and bodies. But, you know, I still think it's really interesting.
No, I agree. I think it's I really like what they're going. Everyone I talk to that knows anything is really excited about the edition. Little worried about AdMech, but other than that, super excited. So
I've seen you say this a number of times now, which is AdMech is as broken as Iron Hands, which is historic broken levelness. Is it just because of the misprint on the weapons, or is there more to it than that?
No, they're just extraordinarily strong. And when I say Iron Hands, I don't mean like Broviathan. I think they're a step below that. I mean like just in general, they are now the strongest army compared to anybody else. And the more 9th edition rules come out, the more I believe that, because I don't think they're losing out on anything. I think they're only gaining. And I know I'm not the only one. Brian Pullen said it on Can Hammer's interview. He felt that they were like by far the S tier. They just have so much damage output right now, like an absurd amount for not a whole lot of CP. If you're playing against them with a mostly melee army, if they take 1 to 2 squads of Cerberus Raiders, you just can't engage them any longer, because for 2 CP, they move 14 inches when you try to charge them. And now with the new rules to charge, you just automatically fail that charge. So yeah, there's a lot there that makes AdMech extremely strong coming into this next edition. And we don't have any reps because of COVID for people to kind of realize that yet. And if you look at where top players are going, if you look at what they're collecting and what they're painting, that's often a good sign. And there are a lot of them purchasing and building AdMech for a reason. So we'll have to wait and see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe like the people I'm talking to are wrong. But I feel like we're going to be going into the edition with AdMech on top for a little bit, at least until we actually get some results. And then hopefully they get toned down a little bit.
I gotta say that I don't hate that though. They've only ever done okay, but they were pretty much bottom of the pile and got kicked in for most of the entire of 8th, right? Like
they had builds that were very strong, but they were never the top tier by any means.
Yeah. This is notwithstanding like any points adjustments though that would be potentially inbound for
Yeah, and I mean the scuttlebutt I'm hearing on that is they don't have much in the way of points adjustments. A couple units, and that's
because that is an army, for example. If you look at if you could trend their points per model over 8th edition, it's probably like 2/3 what it was out of the gate, right? So you would have thought there'd be an upward adjustment there, because
and I'm sure there's going to be
make up bland rules.
But from everything I'm hearing, it's going to be an AdMech world. And you know what? Like, we could be wrong, right? We could come into this, and it's just like with every edition we've had, I've said this multiple times as well on shows, someone's going to be like, oh, they forgot this unit existed. And with the stratagem, they're unkillable. And then everyone, well, not everyone, but like there's a hardcore competitive part of the community that's like, I'm going to run 200 Razorwing flocks, and the end. You're like, let me win for a month, and then someone will make an FAQ.
This is not actually... I'm not baiting anyone or trolling anything with this comment, but it actually is not a bad thing that the first major event for 9th edition will not be the WTC, formerly the ETC, also ATC, because last time when 8th dropped last time, those were the first events out and they're team events. So immediately those teams were looking for the biggest skew list they possibly could, because you use trump cards and matchups and you're just trying to get things that can demolish. And so the most broken, spammed out lists were like the first things anyone ever saw about competitive 8th edition.
Yep.
Which did lead to those things getting addressed very quickly. But maybe it's not a bad thing that, tournaments are on the down low for a little while.
Don't you like that? Like, don't you want that cycle to occur? Personally, I think it should be better that they're caught beforehand. use all that money you're making Games Workshop to buy a rigorous in-house playtest team, who work super hard and do a good job. Yeah, you can afford it, do it. You're being lazy and cheap. But I personally think that it's quicker that those things. It's good that those things get brought out the gate very quickly.
Yep.
Obviously, that puts it into our mental landscape, and someone's like, "Well, I'm definitely going to go and buy myself a Fire Raptor now." At one point. So that was a thing. But, they can also approach that and do something about it. And you did see those changes occur, albeit maybe too slowly or not fast enough, depending on who you are and what you think. But we saw those changes happen, so that's a positive.
Yeah. And I mean, early 8th edition, they were popping out FAQs, like they were cokes out of a vending machine. It was really quick, to the point where people complained, right? Like the casual community couldn't keep up with, FAQs every 2 weeks to try and address these, things that were popping up that hadn't been expected. So that's why they came out with this, we're going to release only X amount of FAQs every year. Here's the timeline for them. And we're going to miss that timeline by a month every time. But otherwise, here it is. And I mean, it worked out in some ways for the general community way better than for the competitive community. So when we saw things that were absolutely broken, it was, I guess we're going to have to wait for the spring FAQ to fix this. But yeah, overall, now that they have an app, hopefully they can speed up the process a little bit. So
for errata and adjustments and things like that, it seems like that should be easier for them to address. Although I didn't like the wording of FAQs being a day one download, suggesting it's going to be another 400 PDFs. So hopefully the app is ready to go. We haven't had much more.
I'm pretty certain we're going to see. I think we're going to see rewrites to quite a lot of the existing codexes on day one. I think it's going to be like a treasure trove of information, which is genuinely exciting, because I wouldn't want them to just kind of half-arse it and go into it. Val, didn't you have a point about release schedule and new information? Wasn't this a thing that you wanted to talk about at top of the show? Did you say something? I had a point to make. You said to me,
"What?"
I've got a Yeah, you said, before we were on air, you said, I have a point to make. Nope, never mind. About release schedule, I said there's been a lot out recently. It's been quite a bit.
Oh, no, that was my anecdote about trying to do basic home electrical wiring and failing miserably.
Okay.
I have a prompt for you guys, which is, and this is probably a good one for Falcon, but Rob, feel free to pop in there. Pete Pratt says, so basically what we're saying here is I should box up my 60 Gene Stealers and 90 Hormigants or whatever and figure something else out. Do we think there's any, I guess it's just going to depend on how it all comes together, but how do you see potential hordes working out here?
I think the thing that I don't think they'll work, but I could be wrong. And here's why. If you look at other competitive games, oftentimes it's the list that kind of breaks the mold that starts pulling off wins, at least every now and then, right? So if nobody's running hordes, everybody might switch to elite killers and vehicle killers. Yeah. And now, as long as you are someone like an Eric Lathuris, who is very methodical with his unit placement and model placement, and you just kind of change your thinking about how screening works, then running those Gene Stealers and Hormigants isn't a terrible idea. I mean, with Kraken, you can now go up the board and back, essentially, given the new area of effect you have, unless they get changed in terms of how their stratagems work. So you can do a lot with that. The problem is going to be, how cheap is a Thunderfire cannon that pulls, half your squad in one shot? How cheap are these blast weapons, right?
I think that's the key point, though, isn't it? Really, I understand the cyclical meta. Everyone does X, then you can do the other thing because no one's expecting it. But problematically, what we have currently in the edition is even the things that are mid-range can deal with a horde. Are still decent enough in other places. So unless all of those mid-range weapons kind of go up, I mean, if you just look at the rapid-fire weapons that are out there, that they're cheap enough currently that they can just delete most of a horde. And actually, because the higher strength value and maybe some AP, they do it better than you would want. So horde killing's already good. So the negative effects on them. The only thing I think that could save them is board space and terrain. Those are the only things that I could think, but that's still asking a lot. Do you not think?
Or even just something I was mentioning before, just the idea of like MSU horde. So bringing as many units as you humanly can, rather than models. It's going to be about spamming out as many cheap units as you can. I can see that having a lot of play, and then just being an
we can reserve everything, right? So in my mind, horde armies are now one, maybe two big blobs, and that's it. And then the rest of your list is whatever elite stuff you can fit to make work in this edition. Whether if you're playing Genestealer cults, if that's like aberrants or Tyrannid warriors now for nids, because Tyrannid warriors are absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure if a squad of 5 is as good. They were doing really well with that 8 or 9 man, but
something you mentioned that actually I didn't even put together at all, which will have a big impact on the power of units, is a lot of times you would like really key up that 10 person unit of Mega Nobs, the like before Mob Op got changed, that 25 Luda unit, so that way you could just juice it with all of your buffs, all of your strats, all that kind of stuff. Now if it's ultra dangerous to have a big expensive unit like by model count, then you're actually going to reduce the power of individual units, which is kind of interesting.
Well, no, because you only reduce that buff stacking as it occurs on a horde. You still have that buff stacking available on those elite units, like like Fire Twice or whatever it might be. So you still get all of the power bonuses in the right places. It specifically doesn't apply to hordes. You can still do that.
But we were talking about it before. Really, I mean, the cutoff for what qualifies as a horde is 6. It's not 10.
That's true.
So when you think of like a unit of paladins, you wanted a unit of 10. Now it's dangerous for coherency reasons, for barrage reasons. Yeah, great. They have a 2-up cover save. 2-up armor save. Cool. I'm gonna just hit them with 1 million shots from a single wyvern or a single thunderfire cannon. Yeah.
Well, that actually lets me segue and brings up the thing that I think is fairly relevant. Now, not all data sheets, obviously, especially character data sheets, had a lot of abilities built into their own data sheets, right? That's always been a case. But sometimes you often didn't have units, and especially like you had some universal special rules. If you guys aren't familiar with that term, that would be a rule like the fly keyword, and if you saw it on a data sheet, that means it would apply to that, and you're like, okay, I understand what that means. That's great. But talking about the new melter gun Marines. They've got their own ability on there, which is, obviously, if you stand still, you can fire twice. Now
it's not even that.
Oh, is it?
It's if you only target one unit, you fire twice. It's even better.
Okay. All right, fuck me. Sorry.
It's like do the thing that you probably were going to do anyway, as long as you understand probability, and you get better at it. So
and they also they've got some nice guns, and also if you can deep strike, there's loads of stuff. But and we'll talk about them in a minute and how they make Fire Dragon sad. But I like that their ability is now. I already know that there are abilities on other data sheets, but I feel like one of the things that they made a mistake doing with 8th is stratagems. I feel like that was a mistake. I feel like they didn't really understand how much front loading armies would do. And I feel like one of the positives is we might start to see more abilities just put onto data sheets and left there, because I actually think that that's a better way to process and develop the game. I had a conversation with someone yesterday. They think that actually USRs are better, universal special rules, but I feel that that's problematic. I much prefer the Marvel Crisis Protocol Age of Sigmar style, where you have core rules and then I have a card or a unit or whatever it might be, and they kind of like they shift those rules around just for them. So if they're the problem, I can either change their rule or change their points. That's my way of changing the process. It's a much more elegant, because it's just continually bolting on things, and then I could just delete, retcon, or FAQ the additional bolt on. But when I bolt a unit on, and then I have special universal stratagems that I can apply as a bolt onto those, there's another level of interaction that's really hard to process and write rules for, but also point for. And I quite like that data sheet. Now I know I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that we might see more of that? That's what I'm kind of hoping for. Was that too long-winded and not really?
No,
accurate?
it was too.
Go ahead, Pete.
I like your point about being able to fix individual units when they have rules like that. I think the benefit of universal special rules isn't that, though. The benefit of them and why I think they should exist is because GW likes to copy and paste rules onto units and then not actually paste. They just rewrite it. And so they forget a comma, they add an and.
Just phrase it slightly differently, which makes it have a
and then it completely changes the rule. And then when you use that unit, everybody is like, well, no, I have this unit that does that, and it doesn't work that way. And then you have to be like, well, yours says or, and mine says also. And then you ask somebody that actually should know anything about it, like Reese or Frankie, and they're like, what are you talking about? It's the same rule. And then you have to like point it out to them and be like, read your rules, Reese. And then he gets like, shut up, Peter, you don't know anything. And I'm like, I do, I know so many things. And it's and then I cry. But yeah, like that's the where universal special rules become a boon is you can avoid sloppy rules writing. So I think there's a benefit to
just,
both.
I don't know, use a spreadsheet.
I mean, well, whatever. Whatever.
And I'm curious to see, because right now, like if you look at how the facts are done, because they were done sort of in a row, right? Like they were incremental. That's the word I'm looking for. As new things were released, they patched things backwards. The same problem applied. So as they were patching things, they would forget about a ruling over here. Mm-hmm. So like you try, like when a judge at a tournament's trying to make a decision, they will often try and use precedents. So like if there's two similar rules, only this one got FAQ'd, they'll sometimes apply it to this one, even if it's a different faction. However, GW broke that logic in a bunch of places because they would rule essentially the same rule that was written a little bit differently, 3 different ways.
Sometimes written the same. There were ones that were written exactly the same, and they would have in one FAQ that it worked a certain way, and then in another one it worked a different way. Anybody that played Slanesh or tried to until they became semi-decent will scream at the hills about the like always strike first rulings that different armies got, because even though they were all worded very similarly or exactly the same, in different FAQs they got different bonuses depending on whoever was writing it felt at the time. So certain people got way better versions of always strike first and always strike last than others in this edition.
Yeah,
that's example.
And that is cross-system as well. Like Age Sigmar, same thing. Everyone in the chat is same thing. They just need to bring in a core editor whose job it is to just, like a technical editor, like hire a fucking lawyer, just to read it through.
That's running your tournaments, by the way. There are so many people out there that are literally professionals at this, and that's why these rules get picked apart. Because, like, your demographic are, like, super nerds who got good jobs and can afford your shit, right? So, like, you're going to get criticized on these technical points. Anyway.
And as deservedly so, I think. But I honestly love the bolt-on system, takeaway system over universal special rules. I feel like it's easier to understand that process. And I won't lie, I haven't been a huge fan of strats. I think like 80% of the strats are worthless. That's how it generally works. Like maybe it's a little bit lower, that percentage, maybe it's a little bit lower, but I feel like you front load, like you have your book and you think, I really like these units, and you think, oh well, unfortunately that stratagem gives you an extra 1 AP on a melee attack in close combat, and this one allows you to fire twice on something that shoots 48 inches. There's no comparable, go on.
If you look at like design philosophy, I think strats were very much an attempt to take that data slate method, which is I have a bunch of abilities on my unit can do X, Y, and Z, and to try and take some of those rules off of there, so that way you don't have, so you could have a unit that could be very powerful for a turn or two, but after that, it's just sort of its power level goes down quite a bit, and that way you don't have these. Remember, in the context of 7th edition, very powerful, stacked buffs, stacked rules. A lot of them were shared rules from characters. There was all these things that would get stacked. So they were trying to sort of disassociate things, remove the universal special rules so that each unit could be tailored, and then you could juice it with these strats. The thing that started to happen, though, is I think they kind of forgot that was the point, or maybe not, but nonetheless, that seemed to be what happened. And so they kept layering, they kept adding more and more and more to data slates while also adding crazy strats, while also, with this case of Space Marines, adding 2 different faction bonuses. So they just sort of got carried away in the other direction because more rules is more fun. I agree, but to your point, Rob, it is super hard to make sure everyone's able to compete at that level. It becomes a pretty crazy arms race.
Yeah,
Well,
and the more variables you have, the harder it is to make sure there aren't any broken interactions.
True that.
I love strats. I think they are great, specifically for what Val called out initially, which is they help add a little bit of flavor to units in what should be a 1 or 2 time deal. I think the problem, and Rob, you're hitting it. The problem with strats is that they're not built with fairness in mind or balance in mind, because as the game progressed, they got way more imaginative with strats. If you look at all the early Marine books, they all basically had the same 3 pages of strats, with maybe 1 or 2 extra that were flavorful to them. And generally every codex had like 1 or 2 strats that was absolutely like batshit crazy. Why did you print that? Like for Guard, Vengeance for Cadia. Why is that a thing? Every Chaos player has said for 3 years now. So like that exists for sure. And they've kind of, they keep like we have with Universal Special Rules, they just kept layering shit on. So now you have Possessed that have like 18 stratagems you can apply to them if you want to, and psychic abilities and things like that. And they went from a unit no one would ever take to like the core unit in a philosophy, in like a list philosophy, because you can just pile 18 different things on them. Marines became good because they just naturally have 6 more special rules than everybody else has. So it's just about, they need to be more careful moving into this next edition on what gets applied to what. I think the keyword idea is great, but just remember how many keywords you're giving to units when you do that, so that you don't have oh, this thing works on demons, which means it also works on possessed, which means it also works on this ad nauseum, until you can give a thing like plus 18 attacks and mortal wounds on 4+, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, so one of the things... Oh, go on, Val, after you, sorry.
What was it going to say? It's gone. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, well, I was just going to mention one of the things that we've seen recently in Age of Sigmar, which I actually think is another way of entering that design space, which I think marries what you, Val, were talking about in what I also think that what they were trying to do when they first described stratagems to me, which was from Robin himself. He was telling me about it like just in a meeting. I was like, that sounds amazing. So like I'm like outthinking my opponent. I'm spending this to do this thing, but then when you read them, you think, you haven't hit the nail on the head there. Like, I know what you were trying to achieve. But one of the things that they've done in AOS at the minute with a couple of factions that maybe some people don't like, but I think I like, is that there's a unique resource. So the new elves, they've got a unique resource which is actually applicable to each unit. So like this unit has got a unique resource, and they're able to use it for a couple of different things, like special abilities or to do a certain thing. And I quite like that. I like the idea that, like, because if you make it again key locked to the unit as opposed to keywords and regular stratagems just floating around, it's a bit more, it feels more impactful. So like, if I've got a unit of berserkers and once per game, I can make it so they get +1 to hit, or they get some extra AP, or they do some mortal wounds on the charge, or whatever it might be. But it's a once per game sort of like, or if I've got a character nearby, he's got ability to restock that somehow, but I've got to have a character nearby. There's a resource where it's the unit doing the thing and not some ephemeral other place where I get that information. Because when you get that, it's hard, because that is a universal thing that will apply to everything inside it, but everything inside it isn't equal.
Go ahead.
Go on, after you.
So I think what you're doing there is like, how do you add constraints to a similar system of being able to up the power of a given unit for temporary, not for the entire game? And I think it's a space that they've come around on in some other ways, which is basically constraining your choices. They just haven't applied it to strats. So you saw in the Maelstrom, the way that they redid Maelstrom, so that you actually were doing a deck building thing and drawing your Maelstrom cards from a deck, so that way you could sort of stack it for your army. That was a way of like taking this big pile of cards that could make for a random awful game, making them tighter, and suddenly you have a game that's a little bit more fun with a little bit of chance, like Magic. What you draw from your deck is what you can play. They haven't done that at all with strats. There's a ton of opportunity there to say, okay, you can pick 5 strats that you can bring into the game, plus the universal strats. something like that.
That's really interesting.
You can build a deck of strats and you draw them each turn, so that way you don't know what order they come in. You could say all strats are one use only in match play, so that way, you can do this like friggin' huge combo, but you get to do it once. Instead, what they've done to try and control strats is have the CP be the thing that constrains the strat economy, which then has, because strats are so powerful, it's driven the game towards how do I get as many CP as I possibly can. I'll tell you, as soon as 9th edition drops, all anyone's going to be trying to do out of the gate is how many CP can I possibly get so I can make all my stuff super juicy. And there's going to be ways, and they're going to find them. And then you're going to see the flip side of that is how, and then eventually it becomes an efficiency point, like you saw with Mr. Richard Siegler. One of his big innovations in his Tau list wasn't necessarily the drones and the Riptides and that. It was that he was like, cool, I'm going to go into this game with 6 CP, and it doesn't matter. So like that's all an evolution that will happen with the game. But when strats are literally, generally speaking, only constrained by how much they cost and how much CP you have, it's probably going to get worked around real quick. And I think there's other ways that they can constrain strats and bring their power level down a lot. I just listed a bunch, and I don't know why they don't do that.
Yeah, go on, Pete, after you. I had a point to make.
No,
sorry.
I had a point, but Val's point was better, so
yeah,
I don't need
it was an excellent point. Yeah, fuck yeah, amazing point. My follow up would be is that if we ignore strats or we just kind of put that in the box of let's hope it pans out well, and it's still a really exciting design space. The exciting design space for agency for me as a player that I'm super excited about is being able to do actions, like pick my secondaries, do my actions. So there's a way that I'm winning the game, but I'm not affecting my opponent by winning the game, which I think is the strat problem to some degree. Is like, if you give me unique ways to win the game, score points, do things which aren't delete unit X, make my unit indestructible Y, I think that is a great level of agency. And it also excites me that the game is getting complicated in the right sorts of ways. And while 8th edition might have had its problems in that design space wise, like that, hopefully that they understand, like a bit like what you were saying, Val, is conga lines were, or this is a solution, or maybe it was you, Pete, sorry. This is a solution to a problem they didn't think that they might have. I personally don't, and still don't think it was really a problem. Like, nor do I think it's aesthetically necessarily wrong, personally. But it's a solution that they think that they needed to do something about for some reason. Yeah.
No, and I agree. I think when I was saying that, what I meant was like, when you design a game or anything like that, you have in your mind how it's supposed to look when people play it, right? And you assume it's going to be played that way. And then generally, once it gets to like a hyper-competitive level, people find all the loopholes, and it gets played generally in a much different way than you imagined. So I feel like a lot of these rule changes are just to rein it into what's in not just their mind, but what they feel the casual player's mind is as well, right? What looks aesthetically pleasing but can still be a competitive way to play the game. Conga lines were not, like, there's a lot of things that people did in competitive play that to a casual gamer just wouldn't make sense. Doing certain types of charges so you could move backwards. Because only one model has to get within 1 inch of that unit, and then you can chain backwards the other way to tag something else. Colonel Cabbage brought up the unit coherency, where you would stretch units across to touch 2 or 3 objectives, and then pull until that one unit was still on all 3 objectives. They couldn't move anymore, but it didn't matter because you're scoring points. Like, that's not something a casual player will do. They'll be like, well, they have to stick together. They're a unit. So this kind of forces that aesthetic onto the players, and so they're gonna have to find other loopholes to accomplish their goals. I'm really tired, and I had another point that I've completely forgotten. Sorry.
Well, I think it's been, honestly, it's been the most on 40k discussion, the 40k adjacent
It's
show.
weird. I don't know what to think about it.
Well, it's because we're doing Val's very, very favourite thing, is we're talking metagame, top-down system analysis, and we're not doing specific, interaction analysis, which I think is, am I wrong, Val? It's one of your get-goes.
Oh, sorry, it says specific interaction analysis. I like that's perhaps why I'm having such a difficulty with the very specific issue of wiring a dimmer switch. I know how I want all the lights to work together with the specific switches. It's where those things actually come together. That's where it gets a little bit trickier, you know?
Well, being conscious of time, and you guys have got up early again. Always thank you. Is there any final points you think we haven't made, or you'd like to touch on for today?
I think this is good.
Okay, good.
Go and find the Falcon 40K on Twitch. Set it up so that it gives you a push notification when he goes live, because he's bashful and he won't save them for the internet to watch later. So make sure that you're supporting our friend the Falcon with his really cool and clever.
It's not
Twitch.
It's neither of those things. It's neither of those things. It's neither cool nor clever. Just reading books, because I read to my kids. Might as well read to you kids too.
I'm into it. I'm really into it. Please let us know. I'm going to host you on the. We can host you so that everyone on our show can see it.
I did set that up. I set that up. My feed auto hosts you. So
okay.
there you go.
We'll auto
There
host
you
you.
go.
That's what we'll do. And then we'll do the 40K Stat Center can host it.
I can actually give you. So this is something you can do. I can give you the stream code for Stat Center, so that way you're actually streaming as Stat Center from your account. That can work, and that will give you control. Okay. Anyway,
No idea what that means. I have to figure out. I do have to figure out how to make it so it saves, because that was like the thing people said that night. They're like, "Oh, you're posting this to YouTube, aren't you? So I can listen later." And I was like, "No, I don't know how to do that. I'm an old man."
there's a toggle
plus-
that you need to toggle. That's why day one of the LVO doesn't exist.
So there is, and this is really important. If you want, there's a program you can buy or purchase per month, which will actually do it to multiple platforms. So your Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all at the same time. So people could be, you could be in several places at once. You make sure the world.
I have that program. I paid for it. I don't know how to use it.
Okay, I will help you. I'll help you with that. It's really easy. Okay.
No, I'm quite sure it is. I was setting this all up from work, and just was like, I gotta get this together. I said I was gonna do something on Monday. This is it. Here we go.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Ain't nothing like a deadline.
Nothing like a deadline. All right. Well, it's been lovely talking to you both, as always. Thank you so
And
much.
tell Scrivo to get my logo done. That guy.
Oh my God. Yeah, I will. I will poke him right now. I'll tell him off.
Like I told him, I was adamant. I was like, I need a logo by whenever you can get it done. It's no big deal. Take as long as you need. And it's still not done. Like, what is that?
I remember my final thought. I finally did remember what I actually was going to say, which is, I hope you're happy, Rob.
Oh, here we go. I knew there was something.
The General's Handbook has come out, and that means that it's going to be at least another week until New 40K. So I hope you guys, with your AOS and your little dragons and stuff, are happy, because now 40K has to wait.
Well,
This is your fault.
We laughed about that because the announcement for the General's Handbook was possibly the most. It was just, it's like a group. It's like a guy, and he's just like, "Hey, do you want to buy these new cars? Look at all these amazing new cars. Check out 40K. Look at these cars. We got some second ones over there for AOS players. Fuck off, right? But then we got some cars. Like that's." It was a really lowball announcement.
As it should be.
I'm actually quite excited about it because it's a week of like intense thinking through stuff, looking at new missions and things, and then with 40K going off in the background, so loads of things, right? Yeah, us dragon guys, the worst. But I'm looking forward to 40K. Just once more, just going to hold up as I'm slowly working on my Stomper. Understanding the elite meta, so a Stomper is in it. And I'm also running Death Guard now. Some lovely people have decided to send me some Death Guard models. I got a Mortarian on the way.
Death Guard is terrifying. I think they are a force, but only because of the things we were complaining about earlier. You can stack too many stratagems on the same unit.
Perfection. All of them. I can't
Plague
wait.
Marines. They're dangerous, but in the new world, maybe not, because I don't know if you can run 20 of them and be safe.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see.
Be safe,
Anyway, be safe. You guys got any shout-outs before we head out?
Shout out to my grandmother. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for watching.
Well,
She's not watching.
Thank you for having us as always. This is one of the things I look forward to every week. And tune in on Sundays when me, Rob, Pablo, and someone else try and play Vermintide together.
really well. We're getting really good at it, actually. We might go up a level this week coming. Not
Are you
me.
not playing on recruit anymore? Not on recruit anymore?
We're on veteran, Pete.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're on veteran, but I'm not gonna lie, Pete. Everyone's carrying me a little bit because I've been playing the mage, and it's a bit of a running joke how much I die.
I feel you.
So
well, I've watched them
to
play.
Witch Hunter, and you've been awesome ever since.
yeah, I'm trying. We'll get this better. But yes. All right. Okay, let's go. It's been a pleasure talking to you two. Please follow these guys wherever you can. Soon to be on Twitter, both of them, which I'm very excited about sharing with everyone. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, everyone, have a great